Less is more. You might have heard this phrase often, but do you know the story of the man who coined it? Mies Van Der Rohe is often hailed as one of the biggest architects of the 20th century. His designs adored, his theories celebrated. Simplicity in form is something he always embodied, and his works of design till today hold an important place in the world of architecture. But this path of modernism was not always easy, especially back in the 20th century when architecture was so intertwined with politics. The story of Mies Van Der Rohe is not just a story of great architecture. This is a story of war, a story of defeat, a story of great highs, and the story of a man whose single focus was the pursuit of pure and raw form. So today on Blessed Dark, let's uncover the tale and understand the history behind this man. This is the story of Mies Van Der Rohe. Now before we dive deeper into the world of Mies, I want to talk about the sponsors of this video, Rayon. Now Rayon is a new generation drafting and design software that is free to use and helps you draw layouts quickly online. It is much faster than CAD and it has got some BIM features as well. It's web-based, so it's easy to use and can be accessed from anywhere. You can simply import your CAD drawings or even PDFs onto the platform and effortlessly start working on them. Once you are done, you can even export it back into these files to continue working on them in another program. They also have a huge library of built-in assets that can be easily dragged and placed in your file. Also, with Rayon, you don't just get regular line drawings. You can stylize your plan as you want, preparing it directly for presentations. And since this tool is collaborative, you can work with other people in the same file. Rayon gives students an unlimited account for free, and if you're not a student, you can try out their free version. I will leave a link to their platform in the description below, so do check them out for your next project. And now let's get started with understanding the life of Mies Van Der Rohe. Now Ludwig Mies Van Der Rohe, it's a strong sounding name, right? Feels like he was named to be a star architect. Well, this was not his actual name, or not the one he was born with. Maria Ludwig Michael Mies was born on March 27, 1886 in Germany. His father had a stone carving shop, and from an early age, he spent a lot of time there. This was probably his earliest time of understanding different materials and how they can be manipulated. As he grew, he got an interest in design, and so he moved to Berlin, where he joined the office of interior designer Bruno Paul. While working for Bruno, Mies actually received his very first independent commission. At the age of just 21, Mies was approached by a client to design a house in the suburbs. Now if you're familiar with Mies's work, this might just seem alien. It has no connection with the architecture Mies is associated with. Well, back then, Mies followed the traditional way of building that was prevalent in Germany and the rest of Europe. Now this design might not seem very groundbreaking today, but it was quite appreciated and talked about in the architectural press back then. So much so that it actually caught the attention of Peter Behrens. Peter was one of the most famous architects of Germany at the time, and he was impressed by Mies's design and right away offered the young architect a job. Now this time at the studio was one of the most significant points of Mies's life. Not just because of the work he got to do, but because of the people he was working with. At the time at Peter's office, two young architects also worked, both of whom would go on to completely change the world of architecture. You might have already heard of them, Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius. Now if you're familiar with all three, you know how all three of them significantly changed and altered the profession of architecture in the 20th century. And all three of them started their careers here, at the same office, all at the same time. This introduction of the three would actually go on to impact the life of Mies considerably in the future. But at the time, these were just young architects who worked hard and worked with Peter on some influential projects. Now, even though Peter Behrens was a big name, this time at his studio was not a pleasant one for Mies, and a lot of conflict went on between the two both during and after Mies's time at the studio. In 1912, after 4 years at his studio, Mies decided that he had learned enough and left his job to work independently. But there was one slight problem. His name was still Maria Ludwig Michael Mies at the time, which was a good name, but not really a bold and professional sounding one. So something had to be done. In 1913, Mies got married to a woman called Adele Auguste Brun. She was the daughter of a wealthy industrialist. And naturally after this wedding, Mies was not only in a better financial situation, he also got access to the more wealthier circles of the city. But again, the name Maria, though not bad, needed to change. And so he came up with an elegant solution. He dropped the Maria to make his name Ludwig Mies, and then adopted his mother's surname, Rohe. He also added the Van Der, which in Dutch translates to of the, to complete Mies Van Der Rohe. Now today it might seem trivial to change a person's name, but names have always had a great impact on a person's career. Even the name Le Corbusier, which is famous in the world today, was an adopted one. So Mies was just following the zeitgeist of the time. And with this new name, Mies was able to craft a new identity for himself. And now he began his career as an independent architect, designing homes for the wealthy. But then came the event that rattled and changed much of Europe for good in the 20th century. And that was the First World War. Germany was an active part of this war and all German citizens were expected to serve. So Mies was conscripted for it in 1915. He spent 3 full years away from Berlin, and when he returned, he came back to a brand new Germany. The country, as we know, had lost the war, and the new Weimar Republic had been constituted. In the following years, Mies saw the changing ideologies of the creatives within the city. You remember that house which was Mies's first commission? Well, that style of building was popular in pre-war Germany, but now the classicism that he was familiar with was being rejected. The architects of the new Weimar Republic were looking towards a brand new style called modernism, which at the time was taking over big parts of Europe. Modernism was all about change, about looking forward, about breaking the classical shackles of the past and moving towards a new society which believed in logic, reasoning, and scientific inquiry. At the time, it was all new for Mies, and he did resist for a while, but he knew that the winds were blowing strong towards change. And speaking of change, his personal life went through significant changes as well during this time. Now, even though the marriage to Adele did do a lot for him professionally, it wasn't particularly a happy one. Over the years, they had given birth to 3 beautiful daughters together. But after he came back from the war, they both decided to separate. So both personally and professionally, Mies was going through a lot. But little did he know that both these aspects of his life were very soon about to change forever. Now, along with his traditional house designs, Mies started dabbling in this newfound style that was emerging out of the modern industrial age. And it wasn't just Mies, the winds of architecture and design were changing. Walter Gropius had founded a new school in 1919 dedicated to bringing together all arts and experimenting and perfecting the modern style of design. This new school, which would go on to become one of the most important schools of architecture and design, was called Bauhaus. So experimenting with this new way of designing and building was widely underway. Mies joined many modernist architectural groups and he even organized and took part in many exhibitions. Now at the time, much of these modernist experiments were mostly on paper, but especially for Mies, that was about to change. A big turning point soon came in Mies's life, and her name was Lili Reich. Lili was a German designer of textiles, furniture, interiors, and exhibition spaces. In the mid 1920s, Mies and Lili had met through one of the modernist exhibitions, and I guess it was collaboration at first sight. A collaboration that ultimately led to the creation of one of the finest examples of modern architecture, the Barcelona Pavilion. Now, what we call the Barcelona Pavilion today was actually the German pavilion for the Barcelona exhibition in 1929. World expos or expositions have always been a celebration and display of culture and technology from around the world. And they have given many architects the platform to put forth some of their boldest ideas. So for 1929, Germany put out a call to design its pavilion. The commission was backed by Lili and Mies, and together they came up with a simple and elegant design. A handful of columns were elevated on a platform, creating an almost floating horizontal plane. The space underneath was enclosed with opaque and transparent walls. And that's it. The space was simply that simple. But what made this structure so celebrated was, yes, the simplicity of the form, but the complexity of the details. The columns on closer inspection were cruciform shaped and chrome plated. The marble that adorned the floors was imported from different parts of the world. The opaque walls had colored onyx which was cut specially to expose the diamond pattern. Mies rid the building of all ornamentation and truly let the materials speak their truth. Mies was famous for saying, "Less is more." And this structure embodied that. When the expo opened its doors to the world, the pavilion was an instant hit. It was being praised the world over. This structure thrust Mies on an international scale. He was already a popular architect in the German circles, but this project put him to greater heights. And Mies went on to create some beautiful and influential modernist designs. But in just a few years' time, everything was about to change. In the year 1937, Mies would leave everything behind and flee Germany. But why would he do that? Why would he willingly leave the country he called his home? Why would he leave his practice that he spent years building, especially now when he was at the top of his career? The story is riddled with politics, with war, and with capitalism. It all started with the fall of Bauhaus. Now, to understand how Mies got involved with the Bauhaus, we need to back up a few years to understand what was happening both in the school and in Germany at large. So after Germany's defeat in World War I, the Weimar Republic was established. Around the same time, the Bauhaus School was established and Walter Gropius became its first director. Initially, Bauhaus was set up in Weimar and the school was run by state support. But Weimar at the time had a lot of conservative circles, and so the school was continuously put under pressure. There were a lot of restrictions put on it, and many demands were made of the school, including the cutting of the budget and a requirement to display any and all outputs that came from the institution as an exhibition. Walter, being the director, of course, complied with these rules and pushed back where he could. But it was as if the state just kept trying to impose newer and newer restrictions. So in the year 1925, the school was closed in Weimar and was moved to a new location in Dessau. Now the 1920s were a time of great changes and political tensions in Germany. Even though Dessau was a much more liberal place, the political unrest and the differences of the country were soon entering the school as well. Now Walter had been at it close to 9 years, fighting rising political tensions, keeping the spirit of the school alive. He loved the institution, but he decided it was time for him to step down. So in 1928, he resigned and recommended Hans Meyer as his successor. Now Hans was a celebrated architect in his own right. The only problem was that Hans held communist ideologies, and this rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. The mayor of Dessau at the time had a say in who gets to run the school, and with growing political differences, he finally decided to fire Hans. Walter was approached once again to take over, but this time he recommended Mies. And so in 1930, Mies Van Der Rohe became the new director of the Bauhaus School. But as fate would have it, he would also be its last. Mies, once in charge, made some very quick and strict changes to the school. His first and the biggest task was getting politics out of it. In one of his first actions, he interviewed each and every student of the school and dismissed those who he believed were uncommitted to the principle of Bauhaus or ones that could incite political differences within the school. Now, as much as Mies wanted to make the school unpolitical, the whole of Germany itself was going through upheaval. At around the same time, the Great Depression had kicked in. Germany's economy was at an all-time low, and the stage was set for the Nazis to rise to power. In the year 1932, Nazis put pressure on the state-sponsored school. They believed the school was spreading certain political ideologies that were against them. So the school was forced to shut down. Mies, putting his own money on the line, bought a new place in Berlin. But even this change did not help the school for long. Just a year later, Nazis once again came down, cracking the doors of Bauhaus and shut it down again. Mies tried everything. He pulled all strings. He wanted the school to live on. He was actually successful. The Nazis sent him a letter demanding certain changes and asked Mies to fire 2 of the faculty members in exchange for letting the school remain open. Mies by this time had understood that no matter what they agreed to, the school will always be asked to do more, to conform. And so Mies took an impossible decision. He gathered all the staff of the school, and everyone unanimously agreed that it was time for Bauhaus to end. Now the school was over and the economy of the country was bad. There were very few commissions left in Germany, and the climate of the country was turning hostile day by day as the Nazis were taking over. But new opportunities started coming in from the West, from United States, where wealthy capitalists were looking to work with innovative architects. As much as Mies loved his home and all that he had worked towards in his country, he understood that his time in Germany was over. So finally, at the age of 40, he left the country he had called his home all his life and made way for the United States. Now, as we already know, Mies had become one of the big names in the industry. He had become what we call today a star architect. Once the school was shut for good, commissions dried up in Germany. But this was not the case across the ocean on the other side of the world. America at this time was booming and building great infrastructure projects thanks to wealthy businessmen. Modernism as a style was being appreciated in the US, especially in the wealthy circles. And Mies, being a big modernist name, was getting many commissions. At around the same time, Mies was offered to run yet another school of architecture and design, the Armour Institute of Technology. Today it is known as the Illinois Institute of Technology. In his final years in Germany, he was already in talks with the institute, and when he finally left for the States, a major reason was accepting this new position. This new world was a big shift for Mies. For one, he did not even speak English when he came on his initial trips to the US. He had even met and become good friends with Frank Lloyd Wright. But the first time they met, they barely communicated because neither of them spoke the other's language. Frank, however, introduced Mies to the architectural world of Chicago. New projects, new city, new language, and new responsibilities, while Mies even found a new romance. And her name was Laura Marks. In the years that followed, Mies created some fantastic projects in the US like the SR Crown Hall of the IIT Chicago, Lakeshore Dive Apartments, and the Lafayette Park. Two of the most significant buildings to come out of his time in America were the Farnsworth House and the Seagram Building. The Farnsworth House was a weekend retreat outside Chicago created for Dr. Edith Farnsworth. The glass pavilion by Mies instantly became one of the most celebrated and praised pieces of modern architecture when it first opened. The other project that Mies created that really took the modernist agenda forward was the Seagram Building. This was a structure embracing its verticality. Mies's design included a bronze curtain wall with external edge-shaped mullions that were exaggerated in depth beyond what was structurally necessary. He created this skyscraper as a sculpture, carefully crafting it and giving it ample of breathing space on the ground level. This, along with the Farnsworth House, are considered one of the best examples of the 20th century modernist architecture. Mies, with these two new projects in his arsenal, was at a completely different level. Project after project, he showed how, with less, he could do more. In the year 1944, he formally became an American citizen. Severing his final ties with the country, he called home for 40 years. He taught at the IITC till 1958 and then went on to solely focus on his projects. But from 1960 onwards, his health started taking a drastic turn. He started focusing less and less on the day-to-day operations of the firm. Over the next few years, he began to spend more and more time at home, immobilized by arthritis. He and Laura took out more and more time to travel, especially to the Tuscan sun. By this time, he had also developed a problem in his eyes, so he couldn't concentrate on the pages anymore. She became his eyes and would regularly read to him. In the year 1966, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. The habit of smoking that he had picked up in Germany had finally caught up to him. Though he kept at it, fighting this disease with all he could. In the August of 1969, he caught a cold that developed into a pneumonia. His already strained body finally gave in. And so Mies Van Der Rohe finally took his last breath. Le Corbusier, Walter Gropius and Mies Van Der Rohe. These were the three main pillars of modern architecture throughout the world in the 20th century. Mies was the last remaining one, and when he died, the world of architecture went through another change. Post the 1960s, the world had already began to question modernism and criticized it for stripping away local identities from architecture. Robert Venturi, the famous architect, even came out with scathing words against this style. I like elements which are hybrid rather than pure, compromising rather than clean. I am for messy vitality over obvious unity. And finally, he turned around Mies's most famous phrase, coining the new term, less is a bore. Mies and the brand of architecture he professed had started being criticized all over the world, although he continued to be critically celebrated in various retrospective and exhibitions. His works were being honored and celebrated both during his final years and even after his passing. Mies in no way had invented modernism, but he did take this style to new and unimaginable heights. Throughout his life, nothing got in the way of his quest for pure form. Whether it was politics, family, love, clients, and sometimes some might say, even practicality. Now, whether this relentless pursuit of the pure, the clean, and the aesthetic should be celebrated or criticized, I will leave that up to you. There have been a lot of accolades and honors that have been bestowed on Mies, especially after his passing. But I think the biggest tribute to his legacy is his grave. After he died, he was buried in Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, and his grave was marked by a clean black slab of polished granite with simple engraved words, Ludwig Mies Van Der Rohe, 1986 to 1969. And that was it, you guys. That was the documentary on the life and designs of Mies Van Der Rohe. It took a lot of research to make this documentary come to life, so I hope you like it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, you might have noticed a lot of visuals in this documentary were made using AI, and whenever I used an AI generated visual, on the bottom left corner, you could see a disclaimer about that. What do you think about using such AI generated visuals in the documentary? Did it make the narrative more compelling? Let me know in the comments as well. Also, I keep making documentaries on this channel, so you can comment below to tell me who I should make the next documentary on. Don't forget to give this video a like, to share it, and do subscribe to Blessed Dark. I will see you guys soon with more such content. Bye bye.